Hello ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This is James from 6gamers.co.uk and this will be my final video on the Indie Speedrun 2012. The public is done voting, the developers have chosen their games, and the mighty Yahtzee Croshaw has picked the winner. But before we're done with this speedrun, I'm going to stick my finger in his cottage pie and give my opinion. Yeah. Okay, so this is the 10 finalists from what I think is worst to best. Number 10. The Garbage Collector. Now, I will be perfectly honest here. The problem with this game for me might just be the fact that I do not get what it's trying to do. Sure, I get that it's a side-scrolling shooter, that you can change your planes, you can shoot stuff, you get points for shooting stuff. Lovely. But I get the feeling that there's meant to be some message here, or some artsy thing going on that I'm just not getting whatsoever. And then it's all topped off by the fact that the game ends with me flying into this big man made up of geometric shapes, it blacking out, and then just playing some music, and there being nothing. And then I wasn't actually sure that the game had ended, so I went back, played it again, got to that bit again, and then was met with a black screen for about 5 minutes. And then I thought, maybe this is the end of the game. So, what's good about the Garbage Collector? Well, what is good about it is it has a very cool soundtrack. It's lovely to listen to, especially actually the soundtrack when it goes black. That is a fantastic bit of craft right there. The rest of it, I don't really have too much good to say about it. It looks quite pretty though. And with that, we will move on to the next one. Number 9. Hamal. 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 However you want to pronounce it. I settled on Hamal. Okay, so this game is very similar to something you would have played maybe when you were 5. Have you been able to guess what it is yet? I'll leave you to have a little look at it. How about now? Recognising it? Okay, let me help you out there. This game is pretty much Simon Says. It's a very good looking Simon Says, don't get me wrong, but it is still Simon Says, and that is not a fun game to me, especially when Bop It has really claimed the making Simon Says fun. I don't think Hamal is anywhere close to Bop It, alright? I mean, you get to pull it, you get to spin it, you get to bop it, hence the namesake, whereas Hamal, you're just touching some colours. All joking aside though, or all not being serious aside, I barely call those jokes, it is a nice looking thing, and it does have an atmosphere to it. However, it's not really meaty enough for me to be able to go, yep, this was great, this was brilliant. What is nice about it is the ending of the game, where it's sort of like you're communicating with this machine, and then in the end, out from the bottom of its hatch rises a sandcastle. It's kind of like you've reached an understanding. You've done his computer code, and then he throws you a humanity bone in the sandcastle. So that is very cool. However, it's not as good as Bop It. Number 8. Soledad. Now, I like the visual style of this game. However, it's not really, doesn't really give you a challenge in any respect whatsoever. It is extremely linear, and it is a pretty much walk to here, press space simulator. However, it does have a slight sense of humour at the end in a very, very otherwise bleak world, and I do like the visual design of it. However, again, like the games before it, the game part of this game is lacking, and it isn't actually fun to play for me. Like I said, the only thing that puts this above the previous two is its visual style I find quite charming, and the fact that it had quite a funny ending with the girl slash protagonist of this piece dying by choking on a ham sandwich. It also has the garbage collector syndrome of ending the game and then me sitting there for about 2 minutes and going, ooh, okay, this game finished yet? Alright, it's getting a little bit awkward now. On to the next one. Number 7! Lucky for some. In at number 7 is Caesar's Day Off, and the reason why this one is so low down in the list, despite the fact I actually had quite a bit of fun with this one, is the whole thing that I've been going on about with the other ones, the whole game lacking, blah 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 blah. However, Caesar's Day Off did give me a wry smile, and depending on your sense of humour, may give you gut-bursting laughter. Just wasn't quite that for me. What happens in the game is basically you're Caesar and you thumb up or thumb down certain situations that you go through on your day off, with hilarious outcomes depending on what you do. And that's just about it. There's no particularly fantastic art style to it. The music's alright to it. The thing is it is just pressing up and down and is a bit of a glorified PowerPoint presentation that'll give you a good laugh. Number 6. Cheese and Punishment. Out of all of the games within the list, this is probably 3D wise one of the nicest looking games. The mouse is animated particularly well and the lighting is good and atmospheric. However, the game again is a little bit too dependent on players' luck rather than there being any skill or anything involved in that regard. Another thing that I don't like about the game is it sets you in a maze and it pretty much makes you follow a linear path. Now, it could be argued that the maze is there to create an atmosphere and to create this sense of entrapment. However, I do still think that they could have got the same atmosphere by just having the same linear path. I mean, they could play on dramatic irony with maybe the player being able to see like twisted visages that the mouse can't see, and you know that they're hanging over it. Also, in games like Dead Space, for example, I haven't really played too much of the Dead Space series. In fact, I've probably played it about 30 minutes. But you have more of a sense of tension when you're going down a corridor and anything could burst out of vents, or you don't know where your enemy's coming from, whether it's coming from the front or the back of the corridor. Cheese and Punishment could have also utilised this by perhaps foreshadowing one of the rooms with you can hear a drill whirring in the distance. That is, for a player, maybe quite disturbing, unlike just going round a maze and just following the seeds. You know exactly what's going to happen. In each room you are faced with a choice that means the mouse will either live or die. The game claims that you learn from your experiences. However, I only found this to be true by the penultimate room, and all of the others really relied on blind luck. And the most annoying thing about it is when you died, you went straight back to the beginning of the game, which means that you just have to run through all the same stuff that you know the solutions to, and it's just padding on an otherwise... It's padding on a game that's already not very long. Just keep the game not very long, don't pad it. I don't need it padded. So in short, nice looking and pretty nice sounding, but too reliant in the end on the player's luck rather than their analytical skills. Number 5. Noming Around. Now, this is the only game that was in Ed's top 5 list, also of 6 gamers, and it is a decent game. The only negative thing I really have to say about Noming Around is the fact that it doesn't have any sound, and it just makes... and while that may be a small thing to some people, while playing it, it does make the game feel a little bit hollow and empty and sparse when it doesn't have any sound whatsoever. However, the mechanic and the platforming in Noming Around is very solid and very fun. The fact that your Firefly makes things safe for you to stand on or raises things, is a very cool mechanic that the developers play with very well. The problem with it is the fact that I'm not very good at it. For me, it's like rubbing my belly and tapping my head at the same time, but in gaming rather than physical form. Anyway, and it's nice to see that actually this game does seem a little underdeveloped. Now, that's not to say that the developer has done a bad job within the 48 hours. I say it's underdeveloped, it's because it's a very good idea that can be developed on even further than they already have. And you feel that they've only scratched the surface of where this game could go, rather than have bled it dry already within 48 hours, which is really encouraging to see, and I think it's a very strong entry into the final. Number 4 on my list is Dawnseed. Now, Dawnseed seems to have taken a lot of inspiration from the old-fashioned Zelda games, the walking around hitting enemies in a 2D plane, and it has that kind of epic storyline feel to it as well, like you've got to climb this tower and grab this mystical gem and follow the light in order to get there. It just has this sense of epicness to it, which the Zelda games have always been very good at conveying. Dawnseed is probably the most varied game of all of the games in this list. I don't think there's really any argument there. The game itself has this Zelda feel. You get weaponry like the sycamore seed, which acts as a boomerang. You get little daisy bombs that you can actually hide behind walls, and the little petals that explode from it actually can get the enemy through the walls. And you have cactus spikes, which are like a long range projectile, all of which feel quite fun. Now, Dawnseed takes a kind of sinister tone halfway through. At first, when you're killing enemies, they're just flashing away and then they're down, but later on in the game these enemies start to bleed copiously, and then you start to be thinking, oh, hang on, is what I'm doing the right thing or the bad thing, because I seem pretty evil with all this gore going on. And then what happens in the second half of the game is you play as the frogs, the enemies, and you try to take down the plant. So it's really kind of blurs the lines on who is the good guy and who is the bad guy here. And it does so with the ending as well, with one village being, yay, we're all good, and then the other village being absolutely destroyed, and you just seeing a load of dead bodies and corpses. The game's pretty freaking easy. I don't think I was hit once during the whole thing, and by the end of it I'd finished up with like 12 hearts or something like that. But it is good fun to play, and it does make me think of old-fashioned Zelda, so it's very nostalgic in that way as well. It also varies up the gameplay with the section where you play as the frogs trying to kill Dawnseed, chucking spears and making it more of a RTS-ish kind of thing. So it plays a lot with genres, and then after you finish the game they give you an entire bonus game after this Zelda tribute, where you're jumping around in a platformer that kind of takes the piss out of people being a bit too pretentious with their video games. So there's quite a lot of humour to be found in that, and it's a humour that I kind of get quite a lot because I used to study theatre in university, and sometimes there is all of that looking too much into symbolism and being too happy with, oh, look at my work, it's fantastic, which is what Dawnseed is taking the piss out of. Of course, it's not a perfect game, but it's a very strong one. And finally, we are down to the last 3, and number 3 in my list is Spin Cycle. Now, Spin Cycle comes from that genre of platformer that makes you swear at the screen, swear blue murder, tear out your hair, but it makes you want to keep playing because it is just that compelling. You always think, no, I'm getting this, I'll get this in a minute. The only negatives I have to say for Spin Cycle is, first of all, my controller didn't actually work with the game, so that meant more swearing and hair pulling. and it reminds me so much of Super Meat Boy, just in the way that it plays, except Super Meat Boy has a more fluid jumping off walls, whereas this, if you even so much as take your hand off the directional button, your ninja just decides to drop, and that can be really frustrating when you're getting your platforming on and then for some reason he just starts dropping off the ledges or jumping in bizarre ways. There was one jump where I go up against the ledge, and if I jumped too low on the ledge, he decided to jump down on the blue ray of death instead of jumping across, which was a little bit frustrating. However, the game looks and feels fantastic. It is by far the best looking game, I think, of all of the games in this top 10 list, with its particle effects, its art style, and its lighting are all top notch. There is a mechanic in the game that is different from Super Meat Boy, and it is a good addition. Your ninja is able to grapple from points, and it comes with some nice cool platforming sections where you have to grapple on, spin round and round this section, and then find a way of building up your momentum on these, hence probably the name of spin cycle, so that you can make it to another platform or other grappling hook. That is a really nice addition to the formula, and one that I would love to see developed on even further. Of course, because of the 48-hour constraint, the game is quite short, but it is quality rather than quantity with Spin Cycle. If you like Super Meat Boy, you are going to like Spin Cycle. The controls are so similar, it just adds a tiny little bit extra to the formula. If you are looking for a game with originality, Spin Cycle does mirror Meat Boy quite a lot. It just the controls could use a tiny bit of tweaking. They came so close, yet so far. Number 2, A Letter to My Valentine. Now this game does have quite a few problems, but there is something about it that I find exciting. It's a multiplayer only game where one person plays a stalker and one person plays the victim. Now I don't find the idea of stalking exciting, I find the idea of the game exciting. This seems to be a genre that hasn't been played with at all, really. The only other game that I have heard is like this is due to the fact that I watch other YouTube gamers. I saw a video from Press Art to Continue where she mentioned a game where one person is looking in through a window and has to tell who is the actual player and who is the computer. So that's kind of like this game. However, in A Letter to My Valentine, both players take an active role within the game. One is walking around as a stalker, one is walking around as the victim. The problem with this game is within its balance. It is so much easier to be the stalker than it is to be the victim. The victim has to go about doing certain tasks, whereas the stalker's only task is to get one photo of that victim. That means in amongst this myriad of people, you've literally just got to get one good timing on the spacebar, which is really, really easy to do. Whereas the victim has to go through all of these chores and leaves herself open for God knows how many pictures. And while doing this, she has to spot a stalker from like 50 people that look exactly the same and do the exact same actions. A way to instantly balance this out would to also have the stalker perform tasks as well, so it makes it more obvious for the victim who the stalker is. So for example, when the victim is getting cash out of the ATM, the stalker must also take a picture and read a paper in front of a statue. Something like that. Something that will make the victim player go, oh, hang on, what's that guy doing over there? And make it easier for them to spot who is stalking. The only time me and Luke were caught as stalkers, because I got Luke to play it with me, was when we were being blatantly obvious to each other and pretty much giving away who we were. I had great fun playing this game, and I really like the visuals on it. The reason why it's at number 2 is because it's a genre that hasn't really been experimented with too much, and it's good to see steps and people taking those steps to make this a viable genre. So despite its obvious balance issues, I've put this at number 2. And now we come to the final game in this list, and I assure you I picked my number 1 before I saw what Yahtzee picked for his number 1, but it has to be said that I am in total agreement with him. Number 1 is Protein Pirates. In Protein Pirates, you take on the role of a kind of disease going through a body, and you have to spread out and steal all the proteins from the body and defend yourself from the antibodies that are coming in to destroy you. It's basically a really fast-paced real-time strategy game. The art style is very similar to games like Binding of Isaac and Super Meat Boy, which is an art style that I really like. The sound is good, it's got good squelches, which I found out from the developer blog is actually made from the developers' mouths by going and stuff like that. And the soundtrack is a good laugh as well. It's catchy, it's upbeat, and then it made me laugh when it goes "Arr!", which is always a good addition to a soundtrack if you can get a pirate "Arr!" in there. The gameplay is really simple, and it's just basically click, but there is a sense of satisfaction the more you progress through the game, because as you progress, you're given upgrades to your particular swarm of death going through this body, taking up the proteins. So first of all, for your very first node, you have to click every single protein on the bubble before your tendril will actually shoot out and attach to it. This later becomes automatic, so you only actually click it once, and then the tendrils come out. Then you have to click in order to collect your protein at first, and then when your protein builds up, this becomes automated, and then you get your own self-defense system and stuff like that, which means you have to be clicking less to defend yourself from the antibodies. The only thing I'd say about the controls in this game is it's really clicky, and I was ending up with a very achy wrist by the end of it, because I didn't manage it on my first go. I'm not ashamed to say that. But my wrist was really aching, and the way they could do this is what most of the modern day dungeon crawlers like Diablo 3 and Torchlight 2 have done, is the fact of just holding down the left mouse button rather than you having to click absolutely everything. Sure, a new click for a new action, but when killing the antibodies coming in, just holding down the left mouse button and gliding over them would have still given me as much satisfaction as the frantically clicking. The game feels like an introduction to what could be a bigger game, and I really hope that with their funding they do go on to create a game or look to creating a full game of this. I would definitely buy it, and I would definitely like to see where they go with the development. There is a developer blog that they put along with the game, which I will link down in the description below, which gives you an indication of their plans. Adding extra enemies was something they wanted to do, but they saw in the 48-hour constraint it was something that they couldn't do. That would be very cool to see. And another great thing to see would be to allow some customization to the player. What are the upgrades they get automated into as well? That would be something that people could really discuss. What are the best builds, and what is the best build to give yourself a challenge? What's the best build to make it so that you can lie back? They could really delve into that and really have fun with finding new methods to help the player or to hinder the player. I think in the end, what makes me say that Protein Pirates is the best out of these finalists in the indie speedrun is the fact that I would definitely buy this game, and I would definitely back the developers. So thank you very much for releasing this game, and I'm sure that I will play it again before laying it to rest in my recycle bin. No, I'm going to keep it on my computer. It's a great game, and I suggest you try it out too. So that is the end of my 10 finalists of the Indie Speedrun. The usual YouTube jargon now goes here. If you like the video, like it, subscribe, blah 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 blah. And also, if you see the Indie Speedrun next year, do support it, because there are some really cool games coming out on there, and there are some budding developers that really need support and that are deserving of your support. So thank you very much for watching. I've been James from 6 Gamers, and adios. That voice of recognition.